Now, you actually knew a lot of people who were at Porcfest already, so you didn't really need to cultivate some contacts that you could kind of connect with during the whole week.
Yeah, well, I mean, I obviously knew the guys from the LPNH and the Mises Caucus, but I'm gonna be honest, like I was still pretty new in that whole space when I got to Porkfest. So although I knew people, I wouldn't really say that like I knew them. And I think definitely, I felt much more, it's weird like the position that I'm in because like it's just weird. Like when I'm trying to integrate into new groups, it's like people always think like I have an ulterior motive for content or any of that when I'm just like trying to like make human connections and find people that I like to hang out with. And I definitely felt, what I said to Ben, who's one of like the Mises Caucus guys, it was like 2020 was such a weird year for me. And I said to him, I was like, every event that I went through in 2020, and frankly, the first half of 2021 too, like everyone knew who I was and everyone wanted something from me. And
Mhm.
so in Porkfest, I had the time to just like relax and chill and get to know people as people. And it was so nice for me because like no one, it wasn't about Carlin on freaking YouTube or doing walkaway stuff or like however people perceive me. It was actually just like really getting to know people. And I definitely felt even for like a lot of the folks like in the Mises Caucus in New Hampshire, I felt like it was a really good activity for all of us to come through and to get together, and it was like an extended meetup, which was really really great. So even though yes I knew people, I definitely feel like I knew them better after Porkfest and I felt much more comfortable. And I also think it did absolutely give me the opportunity to connect with people that I didn't know and would just like run into at random places. And like I said, it's like one of those things where if you don't listen, like I'm an introvert. People don't believe me when I say that, but I am. And I know that a lot of libertarians are introverts. A lot of people who are at the event are introverts. Like if you are an introvert and you're coming to this event, like you are among your people. Like we're all weird. We're all awkward. We all don't like going to social things. It's like weird to meet people. But when you get a whole bunch of introverts together, it suddenly is a little bit more comfortable to be able to strike up those conversations.
So this was the first time that Porkfest had ever been sold out in 18 years. We actually were two-thirds larger than we had ever been in over the 18-year time
Crazy.
frame. Did it feel like it was too many people for you? I mean, being an introvert and stuff.
No, it really didn't. But I mean, maybe like up on the weekend, like towards the end, it was getting to be like a lot of people. But even then, Dennis, I don't feel like it was overwhelming because I feel like the campground. I mean, to be really honest, I think you could have gone a little bit bigger.
Mm.
I think the campground could have handled it. I think there was more parking than I expected there to be. So that that was actually the piece that I was really worried about was the parking, but that actually turned out fine. No, I thought it was a very manageable crowd.
Good. And then you were, I mean, did you change your attitude towards libertarians by being amongst so many libertarians and such a variety of them?
I don't think I changed my attitude necessarily because I don't think at that point I didn't view libertarians badly. Like I had already joined the LPNH, I was already starting to get involved in stuff. And so I didn't have like a negative view of libertarians, but I think it is interesting to be immersed in any sort of like community for, an extended period of time. And I think it absolutely helped me understand the very specific culture of libertarians a little bit more in terms of voluntarism, in terms of like, just like one of the things that I've brought this up on a couple of streams, and I think I may have mentioned it to you at some point. And this seems like a weird thing, but it was one of those moments where I was like, aha, this speaks a lot about this community. Was I think it was like the Dave Smith event in the pavilion or something, where after the event, like, so many people had come to that event that they had to set up chairs outside and like all these extra rows of chairs. And there was announcements saying, please just pick up your chair and stack them over here, and everyone just did it. And it was like one of those things where everyone in the community was invested in keeping this thing nice and keeping it, and just keeping it running and functioning, and didn't just run right off and leave their chairs or something. And for me it was one of those things that like I felt like I was watching a type of society that the Democrats might believe like this is how communism is supposed to work. Everyone chips in. You're all part of the community and all that. Of course, we know that communism never actually works out that way. But I felt like I was watching the real life manifestation of how that might work out. But it worked out because everyone had chosen to be there and had a vested interest in keeping the event nice and in keeping things on track. And it's one of those things that is a small thing, but it is actually really specific to libertarians. The other thing that I would say is like, what I really appreciate about the libertarians is I think that more than any other group that I've been a part of, they are by far the most intellectual. They are the thinkers. And so if you go to like Democrat events, you're not going to have the same types of conversations that you are at Porcfest. Even if you go to like, CPAC, which I went to last February. I'm not going to again this year. Not because I hate CPAC or anything. I'm just not going. But the conversations that I would have at like something like CPAC, very, very different from the libertarians. And I feel like they take a much more thoughtful approach to things. And I just think the conversations are much more intellectually invigorating. Even if I don't agree with all the ideas, even if I think some of the ideas, especially about like, I don't know. I feel like I've gotten like this close to anarchism in the last year. Like I started out a year ago saying, I think some of the things you guys believe are crazy, but like okay, this is going to go a little bit off Porcfest for a second, but my view of libertarianism probably a year ago was something to the effect of the libertarians are the only ones pushing back in any way against this authoritarian regime. And so even though I don't consider myself an anarchist, and I think that's kind of crazy, I think it's good to advocate for that, because if you advocate for the most extreme possible position, you might end up here. And like, we need to pull back what's happening in this country from like just blatant authoritarianism and at least start to get a little bit more balance. In the last year, though, I have gone off the rails. I'm like, defund everything, get the government out of our lives. Like, I hate everything. And so, again, I think that this is like, if Michael Malice always says conservatives or progressives driving the speed limit. Like, I really do believe that this community is the only community that will actually pull us back from like the edges of authoritarianism. And so, like, a lot of the conversations around that I thought were good. I think I just went way off track of what your original question actually was, but that's where we went.
I oftentimes will describe it as an immersion experience into what a Liberty Village might look like, and of course it's not specific to any particular Liberty Village, but that feel and that allowance and respect of each other, and that kind of bubbling up of the creativity, which is so often throttled down by the state, but allowing it to bubble up and create, all these fantastic talks and hubs and interactions that you experienced.
Yeah. And I will say too, like, and I don't know if this is one of your questions, but it was like an extremely safe place to be. Even though like, it's my understanding that like there wasn't even that much theft. And when you're talking about a campground with people like literally just leaving their stuff out everywhere, like there not even being a whole lot of theft that's going on, like it was an extremely safe place to be. Kids are running around, and it seems a little like, I know that my old lefty friends would freak out because, again, you walk into Porcfest, you're going to see people carrying really big guns around. And so for a lot of people who are afraid of guns, that might be a really scary thing, but it just felt like the safest place in the world.
Yeah, I remember the first time I went up to Porcfest, I was totally freaked out by the guns, totally flipped, because I hadn't seen that. I had only lived in authoritarian cities, and and just seeing people just kind of walking around. Now, of course, they're all safe, and you can see that they're safe, and these are very responsible people and all that type of stuff, but I oftentimes will talk about how being amongst so many people who respect me enough that they will not try to use violence, either their own or the state's, to change me. It's actually, for me, I get this literally palpable feeling of peace in that crowd, even though they're really diverse, even though there's a bunch of people doing things, I go, boy, I would never do that.